My name's Kyle Pazendak. I work for Jamf. I'm an information security engineer. Prior to working on our network operations and security operations center, previously I was on our research team. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the SOC NOC life. Specifically, what is a SOC, which is a security operations center, how they became distributed, and how you can use different types of iOS, tvOS, and mobile applications to assist. And then I got a couple quick demonstrations with Splunk, which is a program that we use internally. So what comes to mind when you think of the operations center? Well, mostly a lot of people think of this big giant room where you have dozens of monitors and everybody's looking and trying to track what is the most important thing. Quintessential would be like the top of the enterprise. You know, you have your 20 best people all examining things. You have dashboards, you have business analytics, you have ticket tracking, you have dozens of different applications or tools that assist a group of people that are responsible for the safety of a network or the safety of a company or any of those aspects together. But to start with this, we need to talk about the different types of tools and terminology that come into this. The first one is what's called a SIEM, the Security Information and Event Management. This is usually in a security operations center, one of the most quintessential pieces of software. In there, you have like Splunk Enterprise, you have Microsoft Sentinel, Databricks, Logic Monitor, Atlassian rolls one. You also have Sumo Logic. A SIEM is essentially the entry point for all of your systems dropping information. So that's your syslog information. Since we're talking about Jamf in the case of here, you could get your Jamf access logs or your change management logs forwarded over to a SIEM in a various different types of formats. Once the SIEM has it, it usually correlates those together, and then you want to react to those. And that's where the next step of these comes. And that's with SOAR platforms, which is Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. And again, you have Splunk Phantom, which is a pretty common one, very expensive though. You also have Microsoft Sentinel, which is kind of a newer one. Most SIEM platforms also tend to provide a SOAR solution as well. So there you get your Databricks, your ServiceNow. And what's very common with cloud operations teams is they tend to roll their own. They develop their own script runners or Lambdas or something that they might have natively in GCP that allows them to create automated reactions in their environments. Tangential to these, we typically also have BI tools or business analytics tools. Business analytics tools would be like your Power BI, your Domo. Dear God, I hope you're not using Excel for your BI tools, but it's pretty common as well. You also have SAP Looker. There's not a huge difference between a BI tool and a SIEM tool. Usually it's kind of more who is the end user of the data. A SIEM will present the same information, but in a context to a security or network administrator, whereas a BI tool is designed to present more information related to like business executives. So you tend to see a little bit cuter graphs in the BI tools. One that a lot of people don't consider or don't spend enough time considering, though, is what they use for vendor management. These also go by like GRC terms. These are a software suite that's insanely important because as more and more products move to a SaaS platform or software as a service, it's not in your environment. So you don't have the metrics or the versions to understand what's going on with it. And that's where vendor management tends to come in here because to fix issues with SaaS providers, you need to talk to the vendor themselves. A couple of these you have like Resolver, LogicGate. We personally use ZenGRC and have rolled our own custom tooling around ZenGRC for it. I highlighted in red each of the ones that we have integrations with currently. Most of these I wrote, so your Splunk, your Power BI, your Microsoft Sentinel, those are all integrations that I personally wrote. All right, the next thing that you need to talk about is in a security operations center, what is some of your more common taskings? I like to deal with this in the Microsoft approach where you deal with the onions. The onion layers are, as you get closer to it, you get more responsible, more secure, and more earnest in your responsibilities. So the most important task in a security operations center tends to be the protection of company assets. So you'll deal with infrastructure hardening, compliance reporting, wing-to-wing reporting. For us at Jamf, that means taking security concepts all the way from the beginning of the ideation process, where it is just a fledgling idea in somebody's mind about how a product should work, and carrying that all the way through presenting it to customers and providing it as a service that is under the umbrella of our compliance standards. Outside of that, after you take care of the company assets, you want to take care of your employees. A bunch of those are like, hey, we want to make sure that the employee doesn't have any data loss. So that's your DLPs. We want to provide a safe space for them, which does not necessarily mean just the physical space, but the digital space that they work in as well. You want to provide them with a computer that will not cause any issues for them. And you want it to be as open and accessible as possible, which is a little bit of a conundrum sometimes. The next ones are GDPR and communications of policies. A lot of these are just telling your employees and then also to the public what you do with data, where your boundaries are, what can be done with a device that's under the purview of your company. This gets a little bit more hairy if you're doing like a BYOD type scenario where you bring in your own personal devices for work reasons. And then outside of that, the next one is taking care of your customers as well. So here we take care of both inbound and outbound security questionnaires. So that's handling things like, hey, I noticed that you guys are not using a standard algorithm, or can you make sure that you're using what other TOS services are available? A bunch of one of these are vulnerability disclosure and also verification. So if you submit to our security helpline, you'll get to myself, or we'll do a lot of the vulnerability verification. So if you say, hey, I hit this endpoint and I realize that you don't have any auth on it, or the auth on it doesn't match your other ones, that's something that a SOC will typically do as well. Also, on top of this is going through the red teaming and make sure we're doing the OAuth analysis or the attack pattern analysis, and then metric analysis across all of our cloud platforms and all of the data points that we have, including dark web analysis as well, finding out, are we finding any disclosures or up for sale any information related to IP addresses we have, web endpoints that might be available. And then lastly, one of the more important ones is actually best practice communication. Talking to customers to help them secure their environment as best they can. We only have so much that we can do at Jamf to secure our customers. Some of those has to be on them. An example of this would be like LDAP, not having a lockout pattern on your LDAP. It's a best practice that, after 10 failed attempts or by IP address or by username that you lock them out. So making sure that we have those published out for the end users as best as we can. One of the hardest parts about being in a SOC, though, is that Cobra Commander is always out there. It's 24/7. Most of the time, if a vulnerability gets manipulated on a company, it was known about by that attacker months ahead of time, and they're trying to follow the company's work schedules to find the time that they can escrow the most. So that's going to be your holiday weekends. You basically, sun never sets. You have constant probing. Most of our stuff is in AWS, but never-ending vulnerability scanners being tossed at it. And honestly, the automated free tools for red teaming service, they're continually becoming better and better. So if you want to go get your OpenVASs or any of those tool sets, they are super easy to get. You can go grab Kali Linux, and you can almost be a red team security engineer pretty quickly. The one that's really hard for people to understand sometimes or to internalize is that threats are not always just external. They tend to also be internal as well. And threats don't have to be intentional. A person can be a threat without intending to be a threat. So, for instance, in the zero trust world, you might have admins on your end users. If you grant admin rights to their computers, they might be a threat to the company just by the existence of the admin rights on their computer and not necessarily understanding the full scope of some of the actions that they might be doing. So they might lead to their computer being compromised by clicking a web URL or something, or getting a vulnerability, or just granting access to their computer, and they might not have intended those outcomes. That's a little bit harder for people to usually understand. So why have we moved to distributed operations centers? The key word that everybody's been using is COVID, but I would actually argue that this process started years ago. It started years prior to COVID. On the right is a map of our global office that we have, and this was posted to Jamf's Minneapolis office wall. So it's a big giant mural in our office, and we place orange dots wherever the Jamf offices are. If you look on here, you got Cupertino, you got Minneapolis, you got Eau Claire, which is Minneapolis's neighbor. You got New York City. We have a London office, a Katowice office, Amsterdam. We have a Brno one. We have a Tokyo, Japan. We have a Sydney. We also have a huge amount of staff in Melbourne. We have a Taiwan office, and we have a Beijing office. Also not shown here, as well as we have 2 different offices in Austin. The concept of where you had one centralized location no longer fits when you have to have this scenario where you're distributed across the whole world. You have different work times. So trying to keep one enterprise level command and control center never really was feasible, even pre-COVID. COVID just kind of put that nail in it. As we move to home hardware, though, it become traditionally too expensive to support that hardware-centric model that you see with a lot of operation center, where you have multiple monitors, multiple computers. When you consider how much computers there are, and if you're a security operations center, you can't have your dingy old Raspberry Pi doing company critical information because, well, you need to be the best practicer. So hardware has to be supported, it has to be managed, has to be relevantly new, easy to use, and hardware has become exponentially difficult to actually acquire right now, especially if you're working in the Windows space with like HPs. You have lead times now that if it's not critical, or you're going to pay exponentially for it. And then lastly, space for work from home is limited. When you're considering asking your employees to put things in their home offices or in their workspaces, you have to be super conscientious of it, which means using hardware that has multi-purpose, or they can use personally, or is just really discreet so that they don't have this big giant mural. Because you got to consider, hey, not everybody's privileged with a dedicated workspace. They might only have one desk, and you have to fit everything onto it. So that leads us to kind of the crux of this discussion point is, when I built out most of our SOC stuff, I got asked to talk about why I put mobile applications and like tvOS and iOS front and center before issuing them out. The first one was, it is far easier to manage. It's really easy on tvOS and iOS. There's MDM flags. You can just sit auto update, keep everything up to date, OS, applications, everything. Super simple. It's also very common workflow to be able to do single app mode. So when you're in an operations center and you say, hey, Kyle, you have the main queue or whatnot, you can lock the iPad, or you can lock the TV device. You can lock that to the application that you're using, which I'll get into those applications in a few minutes. The other one is you get a tremendously long support window for these mobile devices. You look at iOS 15 and it goes all the way back to the iPhone 6S. That's what, a 7 or 8 year phone at the time of this recording. Apple TVs, you can go all the way back to the Apple TV HD, which is a 8 or 9 year old device, and it still functions, generally speaking, as intended. Obviously, newer hardware is faster, but it works traditionally well. The other part of it is, when you come into the management world, it's actually lower cost to manage. So if you want to put a Mac Mini on the back end of a computer and say, I'm going to cycle through some slides for this person to ensure that they have eyes on for a queue, alerts or something like that. If you consider over 3 years or 5 years, just the management difference, not even just the hardware difference, it's a traditionally it's a large amount of money savings. So that's why I wanted to open with that on our Security Operations Center. So, as I said, we're going to talk about some of the tools that are available that are on mobile specific. Mobile tools are a little bit harder. We use Splunk as our mobile platform, which I'll get some of those images and dashboards up to you after this. But they have a Splunk mobile app and a Splunk TV app. Both support MDM and app config as of the fall release. As of recording this in late September, it was in the beta track with a promise that it'll be out by the jnuck.conf, which is their company Kool-Aid event. On top of that, we have Splunk AR and Phantom. Phantom is their tool set that allows you to respond on your phone. So I can literally be in the other room and I'll get an alert that says, hey, we noticed this compromised thing. Would you like to step in and remediate this? All I have to do is click a button on a phone and say yes. Other ones, Atlassian, Service Desk, Jira, and Confluence all have native mobile apps. They're actually also the first native mobile apps that were able to use the Mac as well. So you have the same exact experience on an iOS device as you have a macOS device. So it also, why not buy the cheaper device? You can get an iPad for $500 instead of a MacBook Pro for $1,100. Another one that I tend to like pretty heavily is the Carousel Digital Signage. This one also supports app config, but it's supported it for a long time. There's a other session, search up for that one as well. Splunk also has another session as well that's being presented by them directly. The Carousel Digital Signage is an application that you can get either for your iPad or your tvOS. It's basically like a slideshow that's managed over app config, and you can use various pieces of information such as who they are, what's going on, so you can drop things in. They also have some modules where you can take like a tvOS device or a Mac or something like that, and you can create one SOC or NOC, kind of get all those displays together, and then you can distribute those out. We've toyed with this idea to get around some of the licensing issues with Splunk where they want to charge you per license, but we only want to share a dashboard with a couple of other people or a couple of other teams when they log in. So you can use Carousel, capture the HDMI, and then kick it out to anybody who needs it. And then you have probably the most common ones that you see for rolling your own. You have your chatbots, so that's like your Slack and your Teams messengers and things like that. So you can use automation that's done through the chat clients. There are a couple of presentations over the last couple of years of people rolling their own analytics platforms into Apple TVs. So building them themselves in Swift and then just publishing it right onto their Apple TV. And then, of course, you have the web app method as well of the standard script runner where I stand up a web service. And then from the web service, you have, your 200 or your 400 scripts and you just click run and get the results or something like that. So just wanted to do a couple quick ones. We're going to go through Splunk. This is just some housekeeping. The ones I'm going to show here with Splunk require to be on their enterprise version with at least 8.2 with Python 3 support. And the data that will be shown can be extracted from either on-prem Jamf instances or Cloud Premium instances. Cloud Premium instances will need to contact their customer success manager to be able to set up the forwarders for the access control logs and the change management logs. And the dashboards that are here will be available at the end of the presentation, along with a link to download more. And again, if you need help with any of this, reach out to your customer success. They'll either get it back to me or they will get you in touch with our ProServe to assist with this. So the more you know. As I was talking earlier, why we don't tend to like to use our Mac OS devices, you consider a scenario like this. The graph on the right is showing what you would have if you had cloud access in Splunk. So you have the bar across the top that shows you failed logins, and then you can filter down and find in usernames, IP addresses, raw events, global maps. But one of the problems with this is it requires your computer to be on, so you can't use your computer really for anything else. So if you split your time between a SOC and development life like I do, it's really hard to have your Mac tied up by this. And it can only be interacted with while you are at your computer. And while your computer is focused on this, so you can't develop on it. Solving something during a meeting isn't always easy. I'm on an M1 Mac, so I only get one external monitor. Unless my Mac is in clamshell mode, then I get one monitor, period. So that's kind of one limitation on there. But you can get the same experience actually on mobile OS. So this is another one. This one is showing installed applications in Splunk. There's some other information along that you could slide down through this and get like the history of them so you can go back and date and whatnot. But this can be run anywhere. You get a message saying, hey, what is the current level of self-service on our endpoints? You can bring this up and answer it real quick. Or you can forward it off as a PDF or any of the documents. It costs less because you're running it on a mobile device instead of that. And you can resolve the issues immediately instead of going, okay, I got your message, but I need to get back to my computer to resolve it. It reduces that time to resolving an issue. So Apple TVs are my favorite way. We're issuing them to everybody who works with us on SOC or NOC because they are really out of the way. So here's a standard picture of like you can have it on a TV behind them. It's out of the way. It's always present information. You can bring the focus back on it. It doesn't need to up your device, and it's actually can be used for multiple things as well. So like a common thing on our team is I like to do a thing called Zwift. So I'll fire up my Apple TV so I can do my little bike racing game. And then other people on our team will like to be able to listen to their Twitch or their pod streams or any of those. It's nice to have a device that can do multitask, but then I can come in during an event and say, hey, what ticket just came in, and I can force perspective on it or single app mode it right to what they need to know. So as I was saying earlier, here's the bunch of different apps and dashboards that I will have available for you. Just follow these links and you can download them. They will be in a text format. Just copy paste them, go to your Splunk instance, and you can drop them in there. But just to run through a couple of them and what they do. So the very first Cloud Access Logs, that was the one I showed a couple slides ago. That gives you the idea of who's logging in. It's already baked in with Splunk's AI and ML. So you'll be able to detect nefarious logins, whether they were successful or not successful. After that, you have your change management. So you can create some dashboards related to who logged in and changed what. So you can go in and say, Mary logged in, Mary changed this smart group. After that, you have the installed Mac apps and mobile apps. This one does require you to run the Splunk TA version 2.2, and it is available for on-prem or cloud customers in both scenarios. So you can be cloud for Splunk or cloud for Jamf or on-prem. So irrespective of those. And then the last one is the interesting one, which is the Mac device history, is you can go back and you can view a Mac 6 months ago, 1 year ago, or whenever you set up the TA, you can go back and see what exact applications were on there. And I have other ones available, so just follow that RIP directory, and it'll give you a website that I stood up, and it'll show you the about 15, 20 different dashboards that we're providing for free. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your conference.